first order of business is to approve the minutes of our June 17th, 2019 meeting, and I'm going to call on our Vice Chairman, Gooch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I reviewed those minutes, find everything to be in order, and would move for their approval.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. So the first actual new business will be general fund budget amendment for the sheriff's office. Sheriff, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it. The only thing I've got is an insurance recovery, $16,440 going into 718 account.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Peak?
Yes. Motion carries. All right.
Thank you, Sheriff. Appreciate it.
Okay, our next item on the agenda is the highway fund budget amendment. I assume Mr. Brooks is here for that. Okay, there he is.
All right, what I have for you tonight is actually a budget amendment, two budget amendments, actually, one for highway and one for public works, to purchase some new equipment. Just take them one at a time. The highway department one we'll do first because we're moving money around inside the accounts. We're not going to fund balance for additional monies. But in the highway, we're moving money from the 62,205 and putting it with money that's in the 68,714 to purchase some pickup trucks, a skid steer loader, an attachment for the skid steer loader, and a trailer to haul that skid steer home. So that was approved by the road board at the Monday morning meeting, and then we can move on to the one for PW, or we can.
Let's move on unless I hear an objection. Okay. Continue.
Okay, the one in PW, all of the money is, coming out of the one 65,000 account, so it's a little less cumbersome, but it is for a backhoe, rubber-tired backhoe with a hydraulic thumb attachment, and it's for those of you who know, it's an extender hoe, so it's a really good backhoe that's served us well for a long time. PW has their original backhoes that they started with in 2004, so it's time they had an updated machine. So that's what I have in the way of budget amendments this evening.
Motion to approve. This was presented at the road board meeting this morning, and to do the job, you got to have the right equipment, and this will be the right equipment, so I'll move it to approve both.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, let's call roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Peak?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay. The fourth item that we'll be discussing is the 2018-19 budget amendments as necessary. Lisa, we got anything we need to look at now
I
on
think there were
these?
any further amendments we had that,
I don't.
this is just kind of a placeholder in case any amendments came up last minute, so I think we can spin to this.
This is actually our July meeting that we're having, so that's why we're catching some of these things. All right, the next thing we'll be looking at is the general purpose school fund budget amendment. And I assume, yeah, there we go, Mr. Savage, Director of Schools. Okay. Welcome, Mr. Spurlock.
Hey, how are we doing? Okay, we've got general purpose
fund amendments. We've got some cafeteria fund amendment and also educational programs. So if you don't mind, we'll take, I think there's about 9 of those amendments from the GP. If you can just run through those together and do one vote.
Unless I hear an objection, if somebody wants to stop, y'all call it out. But yes, please continue.
Okay. All right, Fund 141, the general purpose school budget for 2018-19 budget amendments, career and technical education. This amendment moves already budgeted career and technical education funds between the 2 functions in CTE. And the primary reason for this is behind this amendment is because May and June travel for the national competition participation had to be moved from the Perkins federal budget back in the DP budget. These competitions are part of the requirement for CTE. All right, number 2, liability and property insurance. This amendment reallocates a total of $127,240 in already budgeted liability and property insurance premiums to the insurance line items where they are needed. Number 3, technology. The State Department of Ed has made a change in the account we use to record access points and other expenditures related to our network in schools. This amendment moves $842,000 in already budgeted technology expenditures from the function 71,100 to the technology function 72,250, and it cleans up expenditures within that function. Number 4, revenue committed fund balance and related expenditures. This amendment covers $330,207 in revenues that are related to specific expenditures and reduces it by $23,235. The fire insurance proceeds from Blackman Wrestling Building that are being held in account 34655 committed for education in order to cover the $44,010 in expenditure for the building of that structure. It's broken down as follows: $234,637 in E-rate revenue. Of that, $158,869 to technology budget, and the remaining $75,768 transferred to Fund 189 for elementary land. $41,008 revenue and the offsetting expense for the SPED individual education accounts. $3,850 additional state revenue from the voluntary pre-K classes. $30,000 for safe school funds and related expenditures, and $20,775 in additional insurance proceeds from the Blackman Wrestling Building. Last revenue is being combined with the $23,235 from the funds committed for the Blackman Wrestling Fund to cover the $44,010 in expenditures account 76-100-399. The Engineering and Construction Department have used this $44,010 to move towards preparing for the replacement of this building. Motion to amend $330,270 in revenues related to, okay, hold on, time out. Let me go back. Let's go to number 5. Committed fund balance for new schools. This amendment moves $5 million that has been set aside in account 34655 that's committed to the fund balance to cover the first year operating costs at both Rockville and Rocky Fork Elementary to the unassigned fund balance account 39000. Number 6, 2018-19 revenues. This amendment increases 2018-19 revenues by $8,494,755 and uses $524,497 for the 2018-19 expenditures. The 3 largest expenditures total $475,000 and are for custodial supplies, our nurses, and our trustees commission. Number 7, substitute teachers. Cleanup budget amendment of $61,500. Move his budgeted substitute teacher expenditures between functions to address the actual cost of the contracted substitute teacher service in the various areas, whether it be in regular instruction, alternative school, or special ed. Number 8, transfer within major functions for non-labor items. This cleanup budget amendment of $688,252 moves budgeted funds within the major functions to cover actual non-labor expenditures such as maintenance and equipment purchases that is occurring at the end of the school year to prepare for the next school year. This budget amendment transfers already budgeted non-labor item line items to more accurately report actual expenditures, and it does not impact the fund balance. Number 9, career and technical education textbooks. This budget amendment of $105,000 is to cover additional textbook expenditure costs for the CTE program by moving budgeted funds from the regular instruction textbook line item. Motion to approve these amendments to the 141 general purpose school budget as presented.
Many of these are just year-end cleanup menu
That's-
amendments.
that's correct.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. I do have one quick question on item 6. The revenue increase there, is that our final increase you think we'll see?
We don't know the growth number. The state told us back in May, we probably won't get the final growth number until in July.
Late July.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think I was conservative in that number. I think it will come in a little higher until we get it, but we don't know.
Are there any other questions on these items, these 9 items? Okay, we have a motion and a second. I hear no further discussion. Call roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Peak?
Yes, motion carries.
All right, number 2, Fund 143, Centralized Cafeteria 2018-19 Budget Amendments. This amendment reduces the budgeted $1,396,155 deficit in this fund by $725,000 to $671,155. The revenues are being increased by $910,000, and net increase in expenditures is $185,000. Contracted maintenance, commodity delivery charges, higher food costs are line items requiring most of this increase. Motion to amend the 2018-19 Centralized Cafeteria Fund budget by increasing both revenues by $910,000 and net expenditures by $185,000 as presented.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Peak?
Yes, motion carries.
All right, number 3, Fund 189, our building program 2018-19 budget amendment. It's our E-rate revenue. This amendment takes the $78,768 that was budgeted in the general purpose school transfer expenditure, and he adds these funds to the building program budget for the elementary school land purchases. This is part of 2018-19 E-rate revenue, and it's related to the building program, expenditures. Motion to amend the building program budget, Fund 189, by adding $78,768 in transferred E-rate revenue and decrease the budget for elementary land purchases by the same amount.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Dodd? Is there any further discussion on this motion to transfer or purchase of property? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch? Commissioner Peak?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay. Lisa, I think, has handed out our new sheets. And our next item will be to cover those, our 2019-2020 budget final review.
So this is as we left it at our last meeting. Estimated revenues, $621,529,071. Appropriations, $644,764,792. And that is with a tax rate of 2.2944.
Lisa, I'm going to ask you to speak up just a little. I'm having a hard time hearing you over there.
Okay, so I just kind of went over, but I do, if you don't mind, I need to go over some things in the general fund, some things that have happened. So I'd like to kind of go over those, go to the sheet that says general fund. So those in highlights you haven't seen. And so on revenue, an increase to revenue and appropriations of $18,516 for Homeland Security. That's information that I got from the emergency management when they this has to do with their Homeland Security money of what they're going to carry forward into next year. So addressing this now fixes it so we don't have to do amendment in August when we come back. Transfer from other funds, this has to do with the insurance department, and it is a revenue and an appropriation. It matches, and it is to pay some maintenance costs. Their funding comes from the insurance fund and workers' comp fund. You see down here where it says pause and no increase, and speaking with Michael, it's kind of what you've seen throughout the year, that he hasn't been able to fill that veterinarian position, and so we moved the equivalent of $6,000 out of salaries and put it in that contracted line to get him through the first month or 6 weeks of the new year, in case of, I don't think he has, Michael here, I don't think he has any bites yet, so just starting for next year where he has some additional funds to, have money to.
I like it. Go ahead.
Yeah, for contracted vet services. So those are the only changes that I've made.
So I assume we'll need a motion for those items.
Yes. I wanted to tell you about it. I mean, it's really no effect. Like Michael's, it's no effect. The bottom line is still the same bottom line. I didn't want to let you know. I had to move some money.
Basically, these will be transfers we'll end up making in August if we don't do them now.
Right.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve those transfers.
Mr. Stevens, a motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Mr. Coots. Are there any further discussion? Questions for Lisa on this?
Is this addressing the tax cent from the highway department, transferring that over?
We're just talking about these. We're only talking about
Okay.
this, just the general fund changes that I've made.
We won't be voting in the blind,
Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's call roll.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Pearson?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Dodd?
Yes.
Mr. Gooch?
Yes.
Mr. Peak?
Yes, motion carries. Okay. And that gets us down to our tax levy resolution.
Are we going to have an opportunity to ask questions about other changes to the budget before we vote on the tax levy and the appropriations resolution?
I think we should have.
Yeah, I mean, those were, I just want to read the table, those are the changes that I had to make.
So that's not the end of that discussion point then?
Right, I think that was just those changes I made. Right?
That was
Well, I
right.
have-
Yeah.
And that's definitely why any discussion that you have pertinent to the budget itself, at this time would be appropriate time to bring those out. So yes, you definitely have a chance to discuss any questions you got or ideas.
Okay. Well, we had Thursday night asked about, or Wednesday night last week, asked about if we reduced our pension contribution by that 0.5%. Were you able to get a number on how
Yes,
much that would
yes.
save us?
In the general fund, $264,000. And highway, solid waste, 5,770. 118 is 42,540, that's the ambulance fund.
How much was the total? With the 118, you said,
108, ambulance fund.
out of the ambulance fund, 118?
No, wait, a minute.
That's the
One-
fund number.
Fund number is 118.
It was confusing.
Sorry. Ambulance fund, 42,540. And Jeff gave me the schools, and it was 202,333. I don't have highways.
Did you find out if it's too late for us to make that
No,
change?
it is not. I can tell it.
Is that something that the commission normally votes on, or how do we decide what that number is going to be?
Well, we when we went to the 10.66 some time ago, it wasn't about, but we discussed it in budget. And so at that time, it was leave the same. And so we haven't changed the amount that we were budgeting for this since that time.
So there's a
I've kept
commission
it the same.
resolution that,
I don't think it was a commission resolution, it was, we brought it to the table in budget, so
Part of the
we
budget
just left it the
process.
same.
It's part of the whole budget
Whole
process.
budget process.
well, I think moving forward, that would be something that the commission needs to vote on, because when you're talking about our pension contribution, that's millions and millions of dollars.
Yes, it is.
And I think that would be something that we probably should look at every year to see if we should increase or decrease our contribution. That's a substantial expense. I'd never thought of this before until I started looking at all these numbers. So,
Well, we normally do look at these contributions every year in the budget, so. But
Well, I haven't heard the first thing.
it's been presented to the commission as part of the whole budget. So you're right. So you would have the opportunity to see it that way.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the consensus was, the last budget meeting, that on the Hyacinth from the Highway Department, that we would allow Mr. Brooks to come up and make a presentation on that. So we need to allow that to be done right now.
Well, and I don't have a problem with that. But however, Mr. Stevens was on the track. Let's let him finish.
well, I was
what he
going to make a
talking
motion that
about.
we reduce that contribution from 10.66 to 10.16 for our pension contributions.
10.66 to 10.6.
16.
Second.
That gets us roughly 514,000. That's roughly what I had from the numbers you called out.
Except for ambulance, I mean not ambulance, highway.
Look at it by
But
fund,
would-
it's only,
It would come through.
yeah, that's in total. General fund, it's 264,000.
General fund was 264,
Even.
120. 264, 120. 5,770 for 116, 42,540 for 118, and 202,333 for 141. This affects several line items in the budget. It's just not one. I mean,
For a total reduction of how much?
It was
4, 5,
500.
6.
You said 500, Ron?
The numbers she called out, I got roughly 514,000.
Yeah,
across the board.
that looks close.
Which is what I heard.
Without highway.
Now, the money that we put aside, the 10.66, and the minimum is what, 7.1?
No, it was 8. What did I tell you?
8.24.
No, it's higher than it. It's higher than 2.4. What is it?
Jeffries.
8.42.
842? That sounds right.
8.42.
842.
So how volatile has that been? I know the state has sent you notice saying that this could change and be prepared for a change for it to basically go higher.
What's interesting is that we've done it for several years now, and that's why I say it hasn't moved very much off of what our requirement hasn't changed. So we're putting more money in to keep a constant requirement of 8 something. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So if we put less in, then our requirement would raise, is that what you're saying?
Potentially, depending on market and, you know, how their investments are. I mean, right now, it used to be every 2 years they would do this valuation, and now it's every year. So every year we get a new number.
When do we get it during the year?
April?
So in time to plan for the budget?
Yeah, we have the number when we present it to y'all. I guess what we need to do is, as soon as we get it, bring it to this committee, and y'all tell me what to build the budget on.
And so for how many years have you kept this at 10.6?
I showed that you 15, 16?
2.
This is, the current year is the third year,
Third year.
I know, but we had
2 years
10.66 for
Yes.
2 years.
plus this year. Current. is this
No,
our current year?
no. We did 10.66
Okay.
last year.
Right.
This is the 4th year. Because we had 10.66 for 2 years. And then we had the annual valuation, and we kept it at 10.66.
Right.
And then this year, 10.66. So
Yeah.
next year would been the fifth year.
Okay.
And prior to that, what were we?
It
what was the
varied.
rate?
Yeah.
It varied. We were looking at today, it went as high as 12.
Well, I mean,
7, 9?
Yeah, it's been at 6%.
Yeah.
Something.
In the 90s, it was 6%, but it had gotten in excess of 12%.
That was when everything crashed and the stock market had lost.
Yeah, that's when the
value.
interest rate was 8% too.
Yeah. It's hard to budget when it goes like that.
I mean, I've heard of some adjacent counties that have drawn this down to right at nothing, and any kind of change whatsoever, you know, they're gonna have to make an adjustment right then. You know, the thing I wanna make sure we don't do is, I don't want to dip so far into these accounts that we're gonna have to be forced to do something the next year in races. You know, for what I'm seeing in the savings on this, you know, this is not something that I feel good about inside doing. But, you know, we've all got to make up our minds on it.
But it's still like a 1.5% more than their suggestion. So it still kind of comfortable.
Understand? Is there any further discussion on this particular item? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
No.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Peak?
Motion carries 4-2. Okay. Commissioner Johnson, you had you wanted to request.
Suspend the rules and allow him to,
You have a motion to suspend the
Yes.
rules. Do I have a second? And a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Wood?
Me again. So my friend. As you might imagine, I'm here to request that you reconsider and subsequently rescind your decision about cutting the Public Works Fund by half a cent. And kind of make my case, I've brought a few things, a few notes and then some substantiating documentation that might be part of the conversation that these notes generate. First of all, I need everyone to understand that Public Works is a standalone department. It falls under the umbrella of the Highway Department, but it was created by the County Commission, as most of you know, to do off-site drainage improvements. By law, the Highway Department can work on the road and the roadside ditch. And a significant portion of the funds that the Highway Department received to do that work is from the collection of gasoline tax. So those funds cannot be expended to work off of the right-of-way. So because there were some known drainage issues that commissioners and other people felt like could be corrected if there was a department to do that, Public Works was created back in 2002. And there was some additional discussion about how the funding, where the funding would live. It was always intended to be part of the Highway Department. The Public Works Department was intended to live at the Highway Department. But the funding started out at County General, but it was a logistical nightmare trying to keep everything balanced. So in 2005, the funding moved into the Highway Department's actual under their roof, if you will. So, because of the way the drainage easements are set up and recorded, they exist now. There's no going back on that. These drainage easements, they exist. So, it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to move forward without a public works department or with a public works department that is underfunded. This is the drainage easement book that we're currently operating with. We update this from time to time. We used to do it annually, but there's not as many coming in now as there have been, and we just feel like annually is too much. We did it annually because that's the way we have to do our road book, because it changes frequently. There are miles that are annexed out. There are miles that are accepted in, so our road book has to be updated annually. We quit updating this book annually, but it's still significant updates when it happens. But the reason this book is as thick as it is because there's a lot of drainage easements that we have raised our hand up and said we will maintain. And that's what we're doing. Now, these drainage easements just in this book, there's 595 of them. Now, the first 4 pages or so lists the roads alphabetically that these drainage easements exist on. However, beside those roads, there are individual lots. So when I'm talking about 595, I'm talking about drainage easements that might run through a subdivision that encompass different lots in that subdivision. So I don't know how many miles of drainage easement this represents. I could go back and, get that information, but it's substantial. So now that this book exists, I feel like it's critical that we, maintain the funding that we have currently. And what I went back and listened to on the Wednesday night meeting, and I understand the effort. I understand what the effort is, but I don't think you have all the information that you need to be able to make a completely informed decision about whether or not that was the best, the best way to go about it. So, the highway department employs equipment cannot go off of the right-of-way. The public works department, however, can, but they can also work on the right-of-way. Public works can. Their equipment can, their manpower, their funds can be expended on the right-of-way as well. So, as you know, both of these departments, the highway department and the public works department, is currently being asked to, perform at a level that's really unprecedented. These schools, these road improvements for these school sites are not, they're not a mere suggestion. They must happen. There's no question about it. I don't know. I'm assuming everyone has been out and looked at the sites, but these road improvements, they have to happen before these schools open. So, like I said, these two departments together are being asked to perform at a level that's unprecedented in their history. Now, the cut in funding, which is the $0.50 that's being proposed or suggested or even recommended at this point, because you did make a motion and pass it, and I assume that is for recommendation to go to the full commission. Is that right? That's what that. Okay, so that's 62% of the entire budget for public works. So that's that does not leave us with enough money to even make payroll for the public works department as it exists right now. The 7 employees that make up the public works department. You cut that 62% out. We have to go to fund balance to make payroll for that department. That doesn't include any benefits. And it certainly doesn't include any expenses like fuel or any kind of maintenance any kind of, so let alone any new project. And believe me when I tell you that the new projects do not stop. Every day we get calls about drainage problems, localized flooding. Back in February, March, as you know, it rained, it seemed like day and night for, it had to be 39 days, because if it had been 40, it would have just, you know, it had to be 39 days though. So that created, as you would imagine, just a whole host of problems that only present themselves when we have unprecedented rainfall. You know, in 2010, there's a debate about whether that was a 100-year event or a 500-year event. And in February and March, we had some areas that mimicked what we saw in 2010. So all of these right here have been living on my desk. I don't know how many there are in this little stack right here. 7 or 8. Have been living on my desk since March, let's say mid-March. And I spend some time every day trying to find resolution to these. These are not simple. These are very complex problems. And unfortunately, simply moving water from, for instance, a house that flooded to the next house is not, as you know, I mean, why would they give you consent to drain? If you know, they're sympathetic to their neighbor's plight, but they don't want their house to flood. So these are very complex problems. Mike Hughes, our county engineer, has been helping with this. Everybody that's, you know, local engineers have been making suggestions and doing studies, and we're working on it. We're trying to get some resolution, but these all represent a project of some pretty substantial magnitude. These are not small. They're going to be expensive, and they're not going to be done by homeowners. They're going to have to be done by the Public Works Department if they're done at all. Some of them may not have an answer. I mean, that it's not. It wouldn't be the first time that FEMA said, you know, this thing has flooded so much, we're just going to buy it and tear it down. Guess who tears it down? Public Works Department. Guess who maintains that lot from now on? Public Works Department. Just today, and I don't want to make this sound wrong, because Mike and I help each other out at every opportunity. Mike Hughes and I. He helps me tremendously every day. But today he called because people sometimes don't know who to call, and sometimes we don't really know what to tell them who to call. But anyway, when Mike and I were talking today, he mentioned 6 different drainage problems that he had calls about. I would assume in the last few days. I wouldn't think they were all today, but I know in the last.
It was today.
Oh, all today. Okay. That doesn't make me feel any better. 6 different ones. Who are we going to tell those people to call if we can't take on a new project? I understand what, you know, what's being proposed is we're going to operate out of fund balance. I understand that. I understand that's what's being proposed. But why would you start something that's not sustainable? Why would we start something like that and have to figure out how we're going to undo it? Because we are going to have to undo it. It cannot happen. I mean, it just can't go away. You know, Mike and I bounce back and forth. You know, okay, is this mine, or is this one yours? Is this something you can help with, or is this something I should be doing? And I guess to the point where we don't have any hope for them. I'll have to tell them to call their commissioner. So I want you to realize, I want to kind of go back and revisit that 62% of the budget. There are 2 separate budgets, a highway budget and the Public Works budget are two complete separate entities and budgets. So again, my effort here is to get you to reconsider and rescind your decision last Wednesday night.
So I've got a few questions for you.
Okay?
So the fund balance overall, if we go back to the way it was, goes from 15.978 billion to 16.280 million next year.
See, that's
You're looking at
where-
that together.
that's-
And it's
I know
not.
it's all in one fund. Now,
No, it's two different funds.
Right.
but it's all in the
It falls under
Go
131.
to this one, because it's separated out. I separate the committed one out.
But it's all in the 131.
It's all in Fund
Okay.
131, yes, you're right.
So then where is the
131.
increase? What can we move to the Public Works Department from?
Nothing.
There's nothing at all.
Oh, wait a
There's
minute.
nothing.
It's against,
You can't take some of the wheel tax that goes in there?
That's what I was going to ask.
There's
You can't
there's a
use-
surplus somewhere.
You can't use gas tax. And there's some taxes that are restricted on how to use. But local option sales tax that goes in there, it's not restricted. I mean, that's I think where he's going, is that it's not restricted. You can only use that for, just for roads. Now, I would agree that when the state looks at it, it looks at all local revenue. And we've got to make sure that we meet maintenance of effort of the local revenue that goes in. And I think I was wondering the same thing. If we allocate and say X amount of local option sales tax, that portion be spent for public works.
The problem solved.
That's what I'm asking.
well, then you have removed money from the Highway Department's fund. Have you not?
Not if we have met our maintenance of effort, which when we do that, that we're showing 560,000 that with the budget as presented above what the county's requirement is. And I understand where you're from is because it's the penny. You're looking at it strictly that 1 penny or 1.5 or whatever it's down to.
It's 0.9.
0.994.
Yeah.
Yeah. But can we use, what prevents us from using a portion of the sales tax that is above the local effort and swap it and say, if we take the half penny to use for public works?
You're reducing the Highway Department's revenue when you do that. You're moving it to Public Works. I understand what you're saying, but you're reducing the revenue of the Highway Department.
But you've got to.
Why are we reducing the Highway Department's revenue or Public Works Department's revenue when they're being tasked with more than, I don't understand.
I would say the same thing as why are we reducing fund balance in the general fund and schools and all the other ones, where we've got requirements too.
Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what Mr. Brooks is trying to say, and I didn't get it until I went to the road board meeting this morning at 7 o'clock, is that Superintendent Brooks has stepped up on this school project for both, just Christiana alone, not looking even at Walter Hill, but just Christiana alone. There's what did you say this morning, 9 miles of road?
8.7.
8.7, right at 9 miles, that's pretty close. That he didn't have to offer to step up and improve those roads to get the school prepared by doing that. He just said, it's not my budget, and he's going to try to make this work. He doesn't know. He only had 3 days to make a decision, a guesstimate, of what he thinks it might cost to improve those 3 roads. I think we're rolling the dice of that 500,000 taken away from his budget. It makes me nervous for his budget.
Makes me really nervous.
Otherwise, he could walk away and let some engineering firm come in that we would have to engage and put it out to bid. And I promise you, it's going to be a whole lot higher than what he and his crew will be able to do. So I think the 500,000 is a nit in comparison to what it would probably cost us if we put this out to bid. And I went to listen this morning to the road board meeting, and just for that case.
Mr. Johnson.
I'd like to make a couple points. When this was initially formed or organized, what was the percent, or what was the percent, or what was the appropriations?
It looks
Oh, a penny and a
appropriation,
half?
it was a penny and a half.
Okay, a penny and a half.
When it
Okay.
was set up as a separate
Now
fund.
we're coming along, and we cut them down, took that half penny away some time ago, back down to less than a penny, and now we're gonna come along and take another half cent away. I mean, to me, that's robbing Peter to pay Paul, and my name's Paul, this is not paying me. I'm clear. So, I don't know whether a motion would be in order at this time, but if so,
Could I ask a question?
go right
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Mr.
Go
Chairman.
right ahead.
Go ahead, Mr.
So I was, back in 2002, that era, I was one of the commissioners fighting hard for the public works, and that penny and a half. At that time, I represented Florence. And the Public Works Department was a godsend to my rural district. So it's concerning, and I voted to move that half cent the other night. But if this is going to jeopardize public works and the work that's coming out of the right of way for drainage and flooding, because what happened, you had a lot of the solutions out there in the Florence area at the time were simple solutions, but private people, neighbors couldn't do it themselves.
Right.
And it was against the law for us to do it.
That's correct.
And then this gave us, and it may only have been a couple of day work, and then ditches was cleaned out, gutters, I mean, it was just, like I say, a godsend for my constituents back at the time. So now you're saying that because we have new schools coming that have road needs, which we really haven't had that much in the past, you're being very guarded of the money that you have in the highway department because you know you're going to be volunteering and offering solutions to help with the roads.
That's correct. And I don't know what that, and I don't know at what price.
Right. So I'm kind of changing my mind on that.
Commissioner Allen.
When we talked about the road projects for the schools, it was clear to me, and I thought it was clear to everybody else, that we did not expect you to make those road improvements in your existing budget. Because at a minimum, we were talking $2 million, said it could be up to $7 million.
That was the $2 million that, I don't mean to interrupt, but the $2 million that you're remembering was just a 3-day estimate
Right.
for materials.
Right.
Material
No,
only.
Right, but that's my point. No matter what that number was,
Right.
I never expected it to come out of your budget.
Right,
I never expected it to.
right.
So in my mind, when we cast that vote the other day, we weren't jeopardizing those projects only because I thought when we borrowed the money for the schools, we were at that point going to borrow the money to improve the roads as well, because that really is part of that whole infrastructure project. And so I'm like, Trey, I asked the question the other night, what projects are going to go unfunded if we don't do this? Because it looked like, the way it was presented the other night, that it was a surplus, that it was money that was just sitting in an ending fund balance. And so, like Lisa said, just like we asked schools or anybody else who has money in ending fund to kind of share in the overall, that's what I thought we were doing the other night. But I'm like, Trey, I don't want to jeopardize any projects. I don't want to jeopardize anything that you're currently doing. I thought this was a surplus point that we could help offset. I thought we were just reallocating resources, was in my mind.
And I can see how it would appear to be a surplus. But as these projects present themselves, these projects, this book, and these school sites, then all of a sudden that surplus it doesn't exist any longer.
So if I may, then on some of these road projects for the schools, what you're saying is you're trying to use it, what you can, out of your highway department budget as possible to maybe alleviate having to go to the bond market to finance some roads.
That is correct.
Share. You share it, expenses.
Mr. Johnson.
The bottom line is, the $0.50 that was approved at our last meeting, to remove that, you're asking them to do more and with less. So I'm ready to make a motion to rescind the action that we took on that.
So that is your motion.
That is a motion to rescind the action that we took about the $0.50 from the highway, from the public works. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion?
So we can't move the sales tax or the wheel tax back into the Public Works Department and just fill that gap and end up with a revenue and expense neutral budget? I mean, that was the intent. And I understand the gas tax can't be used for that, but if we can move sales tax or move wheel tax to fill the
But
Public
when you
Works.
move that wheel tax out of the highway department, then you are, in essence, jeopardizing projects.
Well, can you legally move the wheel tax? This specifically says 30% of the wheel tax goes to the highway department. It doesn't say public works. So
It says-
can you legally do that?
Was
I
that
don't
with
think
the
so.
resolution, wasn't that a resolution by the commission?
Yeah.
I mean, I would think you would
I
have to.
mean, that's the formula that's been in existence for the 19 years that I've been serving on the road board that I'm aware of.
So we actually,
You know, 30,
we actually
30 and 40.
approve it every year in our
We
tax
do approve it
resolution.
every year. Yeah, we approve that.
And we rescind everything that
Was previous.
was previous to this resolution.
I'll guarantee you, just like I said tonight, you'd have a fight on your hands from the Department of Education to give up part of their 40%, or the percentage from the highway department, or the percentage from the general fund. You know, so to me, that's, for lack of a better way of putting it, that's set in concrete, you know?
Well, I mean, it's like Mark said, it's a resolution that you approve. When you do that tax levy resolution, there are several items in there that speak to how monies are distributed. And it's in there, it's in that one that says 30, 30, 40 on wheel tax. It's also in there how we do sales tax, 20, 20, 60. You know, so it's in that, and when we prepare the budgets, we use the allocations that you had previous, and that's, you know, until you tell us something else. The thing that we have to make sure of with schools and with the highway is that you meet your maintenance of effort.
I get the maintenance of everything, but both scenarios, whether it be removing $0.50 from the public works revenue or moving the local option sales tax, both of those scenarios take money away from the two departments that are being asked to step up at an unprecedented level. That's my point. Either scenario, you're taking money away from one of the two
That's the
departments.
Well, I don't think the 30, 30, 40 formula, if it's not broken, why try to fix it, you know?
Lisa, I've got a question about our numbers on the maintenance of effort. When I was looking at this the other night, I was looking at it as a whole, same as I assume Commissioner Stevens it was. The maintenance of effort percentage that we were throwing out there wasn't just public works, that was
It's everything.
for everything.
It's everything. That's, when you move the public works fund that initially was set up by itself
Right.
and funded by itself.
It still is. It's completely funded
No,
by
no,
the property tax.
I mean, I understand that, but it.
So
that
there is no
money-
maintenance of effort involved in public works.
Yes, it is. Once that property tax went in that fund, they didn't care where it was allocated. It became a maintenance of effort for the highway department.
That's why I asked the question, because we ran into that several years ago when we were looking at reducing that half cent. That's part of the reason we did it at that time. But I think, personally speaking, like I said, I'm not here twisting arms. I think he's made a very valid point on, where we're taking that half cent, if that's coming out of the highway department's budget or the road, with the things that he's got in front of him. I think, I know how I'm going to vote.
If you look at that sheet, that every year that we have to file, they never ask how you're going to spend it. It's what local revenue is going in to the highway department, to that fund. And that's what they measure against, is the revenue in that fund.
Okay. I'm glad you don't get to vote.
I just think you made a good argument.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I have done the monies for the highway department for the last 24 and a half years. And back in, I'll forget, 2002 or 3, when we built our new facility, there was enough money in fund end and balance to write a check to the construction company that built our facility and everything that went in it. Lifts, drums, air hoses, and every desk in my office. That check was wrote out of fund end and balance, and it still left us money that we could have operated easily 3 or 4 months, if you will, without having to, if we got no revenue whatsoever in. So it hurts my feelings that, and I say this as Mary, as an employee of the highway department, nothing on Mr. Brooks. It hurts my feelings that y'all, and say y'all as a whole, basically you said, you've done a good job, but I'm gonna take your money anyway. So then, why do I even bother? Because come June 20th, I'm not looking for every piece of paper and pen to stick and bind, stick back for next year. I'm hoping I have some to stick back. You can ask my guys, come May, I am nickel diming them to death. Do we really need that filter? Do we really need this? And come June, they are really coming into me and having to show me good examples of why they need this and this. And I'm able to put this money back. And I just took offense that you wanted to take money away that we, as the highway department, have saved. For 24 years, I started with 75 employees. We wrote 65 checks this week. So we really are asked to do a lot more with less people. And on a rainy day, if something drastic happens and we have to replace a bridge, we just finished.
We'll be glad we have that savings account.
Yes, because we just finished up one that is not, we have more that are larger than this last one we finished. I think it was like 2.1 million. You know, where am I going to come begging for money if I don't have that in the kitty, if I had to fix that bridge or replace that bridge? So that is just...
We never come to this table and ask for money from the commission. We come to this table and ask for money from time to time inside of our own budget or from our own fund balance. We don't come and ask for money from the county quote. We don't do it.
I've sat on Public Works 5 years in a row, and he's telling the truth. He's never asked for that.
When we bring a budget amendment, generally, when Mr. Brooks first took office, he's like, look, we're narrowing this budget down, and if we're going to ask for money, it's going to be after August, because we saved, when we adjusted in June, how much did we put in fund balance? So when I bring a budget amendment to Public Works, I usually have an attached sheet that said, okay, I put, just round figures, $1 million, and my asphalt paper went down, so I had to write a $500,000 check. So Mary put, and I say Mary because the highway department put $1 million in. And now that $1 million savings we had last year, because I didn't buy all the pens and paper, I'm needing $500,000 out of that. I didn't touch the initial fund end and balance from the previous year. So that's how we
Nor have we
work.
ever.
And the road commission sees every board meeting, how we finished at the end of the month. Mary wrote the checks on the first day of the month. How do we finish? And they get that report every month, whether we're, August and September, it might look a little red because we're just getting new money in, but by this time, we're starting to level out and everything. So we run this as if it's our own household budget. And if it's not there, we don't spend it. But we do need to have a savings account if something drastic happens. And if you keep going into the savings account, there will be nothing. And you do have to fund those books. And that was a big thing when Public Works went in to effect. They said, once it gets in the book, it's there forever. And it is.
And we're in a unique position for several reasons. We being this body, the commissioners, the highway department, the citizens of this county, we have the resources and the skills and the people to do this work. There's not a lot of counties that can say that, or would say that, even if they could do it. But I am apprehensive. I'm nervous about it, but somehow we're going to make it happen. Because that's what we raised our hand up and said we would do.
Is there any?
One other thing,
Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chairman. We discussed it this morning, and I already mentioned this in budget meeting before, but the Public Works budget that was presented for this year is somewhere around $60,000 less than it was for last year. Is that right, Mary?
Yes, sir, close to it.
Yeah. So, they're not flipping money out, buying lattes from Starbucks.
Oh, Miss Diane makes our coffee.
Yes, she does.
Mary's commentary was kind of what I didn't know this was going to occur. I'm glad it did. I was probably going to bring it up anyway. It's very convincing. I call the question.
Okay. All right. Is there any other discussion? I think most people probably made up their mind here. All in favor of calling the question, signify by saying
Second, that has to be second.
Second. Second. All in favor of calling the question, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Question's been called for. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
No.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Peake?
Yes. Motion to rescind carries. Okay. Lisa.
Just a point on what they said. It's just an interesting tidbit. I had another county call me last year to ask, did we have insurance that covered damage to bridges? Then I went on a journey. And the end of the journey was, no.
We don't insure the bridges.
We don't insure the bridges.
Well, if it's any consolation, we don't get a lot of insurance recovery on guardrail damage either. So that's out of our budget straight out.
Thank you all very much for your time and consideration and reconsideration as it turns out.
All right. Commissioner Stevens.
And, I don't want to sound argumentative or fighting or whatnot, because I know we're here at the end of our budget cycle, but our constituents came to this public hearing, and I've been getting calls and emails, find ways to reduce this tax increase or get rid of it if you can. And I keep hearing, find creative ways, find creative ways. So I've spent hours and hours going through here and trying to find some ways to do that, because I don't want to tell people if I vote no that I didn't look for any alternatives. So I've got some other ideas too. And at least I'd asked you, if we put a cap on the proposed salary increases at $7,500, like how would that affect our budget? I think you said it would affect like 99
Yeah, I read.
employees.
I told you I was going to redo my whole spreadsheet to make sure I had it all right. So I did that, and it affects, if you put a cap of 7,500 in the general fund, it would save $247,478. It affects 86 people, and 54 of them are public safety positions.
And are those like the upper level public safety positions?
They're all over. They're all over.
So in that amount, that does not include the pensions associated with that, does it? It's just the salary.
That's just salary only. Yes.
What was the savings, 200 what?
247,478 in the general fund.
That's less than a penny
Oh, yeah, with a penny being about $1 million. Yeah.
for public safety.
54 of the 86 positions relate to public safety.
And then if the cap was at 5,000,
If the cap was at 5,000, it would save almost 700,000. It affects 269 positions, with 171 being public safety, 22 being paused.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, I'm not going to face any of the public safety people and say that I voted to reduce their salary increases. Because that may be the person that I need to help me when I'm out here in danger or something, you know. I mean, penny wise and pound foolish. You know, we're not a Mickey Mouse County anymore.
well, I know we're not, but our constituents right here saying find things that we can reduce, and I'm trying to do that.
Well,
And I hope you appreciate
I
that.
will say this, I have floated this around ever since we started it on the budget. I've had 2 people be negative about it. And one of the persons, well, I spent about 45 minutes with. And I said, okay. I said, you tell me where we're going to cut, and you tell me how we're going to control the growth. And I said, we'll all be geniuses. And I said, we're going to be opening up a new school out in Rockville. And I said, there's 218, am I correct? 218 teachers that's got to be hired. And we need to educate the people to be, the children to be productive. And I said, those 218 teachers got to be paid. So he didn't know what to say, you know, so, and, you know, I think y'all know me well enough to know that I'm not bashful. I will talk to people, and I'll bring it down to the nitty-gritty. And I have had 2 people that were really negative, and then when I got through talking to them, they had a change of heart because, you know, somebody's got to pay the bill. You know? So I don't think that it's unreasonable. I just don't think that it's unreasonable.
I also think it's very reasonable that you go to this much effort, so I'm certainly grateful to hear.
Sure, I don't have any problem with
You may get
that.
a lot of pushback on the surface, but
Well,
I
these
definitely don't want
things, you know, we're not here to make friends and be popular. We're not here to fit in. We're here to make logical decisions for people, and we can't make them off of who gets their feelings hurt, who doesn't like it. I'm not interested in that. We're not in the feeling business. We're in the good decision business. And when you go talk to people out there and say that folks are getting, you know, $7,500 pay raises, you know, that's a lie. I mean, your private sector people aren't getting that much of a pay raise this year. That doesn't happen very often. Now, I'm all for giving these folks, especially the ones on the lower rungs, a pay raise because they can barely make rent. I get that. But I think these $7,500 ones are going to be more of people on the higher end of the scale. And, you know, I want everybody to be compensated equitably, but I want our books to work out too and take as little tax money from people as possible. So, you know, 200 here, 1,000 here, 300,000 there, 50 there, it adds up. I mean, it's nothing to trifle with.
So basically what you're saying, the upper echelon shouldn't be compensated for the responsibility and everything that they have following them.
That's not what I'm saying at all. I mean, our budget is limited. We have a, you know, limited amount of funds to work with, and we can only do so much. So $7,500 is a very good pay raise.
And when you tell people, I mean, this is just another piece, and I love the Board of Education. I don't sound like I don't, but the difference between what the board has been able to do over the last several years and what the county has done, starting with this fiscal year 12-13 to the current year 18-19, there has been a 15.18% increase to their base table. And for the county, 2.6.
And I'm not disputing that.
I guess I'm saying when you go, oh, that's a whole lot, but when you haven't lifted over over these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, 7 years, That's what happens.
And I'm not disagreeing with you, and the issue is not that, we don't want to give. I want all these people to get everything that they think they should get. But you gotta have it to give. I mean, we've got a limited amount of funds. So, I would love to give all those people a pay raise every year. We've got a limited pot to work with in the general fund. We can't control what the school system does with their money. They have control over their budget. We don't. So, it's not that we don't want to do it. Just, I think $7,500 is going to move that scale in the right direction quite a bit, personally. So,
Well, I haven't heard a motion either way, I don't believe, in this issue.
well, I'll make a motion that the salary caps be increased, or the salary caps be placed at $7,500 with the exception of the engineering and the planning department.
You said except for engineering and planning? Okay, I hear a motion. Do I hear a second? Not hearing a second. This motion dies for lack of second.
Another issue that I'd like to bring up is the increase on the constitutional officer salaries. And I'd like to know if we have to do that this year or not.
If we have what now?
If we have to increase theirs as the ones proposed in the budget. I've heard yes and I've heard no, and I don't know what to believe. I know that Smyrna and Murfreesboro have done their special census.
Okay, that's all I'm saying, that's all I was gonna say. Is that which you have to. And just going back, just like I said, that one that I looked at, that we went back to April 1. So April 1 forward.
Well, the law says that you have to move that scale up. You have to go to the next level after a federal census or after a county special census, and it's effective July 1, after you find that out. That's what the statute says.
Well, if we had to go back. Did we have to go back to April 1? I don't know what requires it, but I know that we've done it.
And it says that the effective July 1 following certification of the census results by the Federal Census Bureau, or after the county does a special census.
I get that, but something has made us go back to April 1.
But that would be the year of the census.
April 1, which is this fiscal year that we're talking about, the 1920.
So can we make the pay raise effective April 1?
Yes.
And that would cut, quite a bit of that down. Because I'm sure we'll be in the next run.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, there's not that much difference between where we were in, 2010 to get to the next run anyway. We probably went to the next run in the next 3 years of this decade.
What's the minimum, or what do the state employees get this year? Because I know the constitutional officer salaries have to increase by the average of what the state employees receive.
2.6 or 2.5.
Are you talking the state employees?
We're talking about what CTES has, what state employees got last year.
The average of the state
average of the
employees
state
is what you have to increase the constitutional officers. So we have to increase it some. It
I
just
mean,
has to be at least that average.
that would increase, yes, you're right.
So it's
It's
not
gonna
like
have it, it's gonna have it increase anyway. Give me a minute. I could go right to my desk, but I could go over here too and find it. But you're right, part of that increase is gonna increase anyway because of the increase that the state got.
Correct.
So really, it's the difference. All right. Go to the website. Okay. I'd be faster if I go to this.
You just stay right there.
2.5%.
Information, do you have it, Mark?
Yeah, I got the CTES letter.
say 2.5?
2.5%.
2.5.
That's what I
Okay.
said.
Okay. 2.5.
So we're not sure where the April came from.
I cannot put my finger on it to say this is where it is. I just know in the past we have. We had to go back and reimburse people who'd already left.
Hey, Liz, I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you. Don't see that on the April 1.
It's what?
It's April 1.
It is.
Back to the year that goes up. I'll send it to you right now. Text it.
If you trust our previous CTAS representative,
No, he's a very, very credible source.
April 1.
So I'm trying to figure out why the law says effective July 1.
I do not know.
And why they say April 1, but regardless.
My concern over this, and Lisa and I had talked about it, and we needed to budget the higher amount if we knew and or thought we were gonna go over this year, which it looks like we will. And we know in the past that we had to go back to April, so I mean, it'd be foolish for us not to budget that into this new budget, knowing that is what happened to us in the past.
So can we not budget from April 1 to the end of August at that rate?
Well, I assume that we could, and I have no problem.
Well, I'll make that motion then, that we increase it by the required average state
So
2.5.
pay elected officials, that's covered by the salary schedule, in the 2010 run
with the,
for 9 months,
correct,
and the next run for 3 months.
correct.
Second.
Will that cover us?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's paying the minimum, and then paying, and make sure that we're not having to go back and repay.
Well, I think that was the idea. So that's in the form of a motion?
It is.
Okay. I have a motion, do I hear a second?
Give a second.
Okay. So we do have a motion and a second. Is there any other questions or discussion on this issue?
I just need to ask Lisa, are you comfortable with that, Lisa? I mean,
as far as audit,
yes.
yes. I mean, that is it.
Now, I have one more question. How much money are we talking?
Well, I wouldn't think a whole lot. I mean, because it's going to be it's going to affect solid waste. I mean, not solid waste, highway, Greg's salary, and then the rest of it is going to be in the general fund.
Looks like we've been after Mr. Brooks all night.
Yes, it
haven't we?
does.
Well, I mean, I had brought this up previously as well, because it felt like we were given this raise a year early. And then when we discussed it, we said, in the past, we'd had to go back and pay it retroactively, and that was one of the reasons that we dropped it. And so, if we don't have to give it until April, and people are looking for us to be creative and figure out ways to not spend money, I think it's foolish to spend that money 9 months before we have to. It's not like we're having to replace these constitutional officers. They didn't take this job for a pay increase. They're in this job. They went door to door and asked people to do this job, and I have every confidence they're going to stay in that job and accept whatever it pays, and they're going to be paid equitably for those roles.
Okay. I'm just going to counter. When you say equitable, when you see the salary tables for them, it's based on population.
Right.
So it's these constitutional officers serving this population.
Right.
And I don't think without a doubt that anybody thinks that we have not been in this next role. So they are serving the population of that. We're just choosing not to pay them at that because we can get away with it.
Right.
Right.
What did you determine it was going to save us?
Well, wait a minute, I keep talking, dude.
But the salary will stay, with your motion, the salary raises if the state kicks up. We have to mirror that.
They raise it 2.5%.
And then if the census goes up, we meet the constitutional percentages, and it goes up again by state statute. And it stays stagnant otherwise. It's not a decrease back to an old, right? Okay, so that sounds reasonable. Thank you.
Can we come back to that, because I mean, can we talk some more?
Well, do you have anything else, Ron?
Oh, I do have another idea too.
Okay, go ahead.
So, are we ready?
Defer the vote on this until just a moment.
Wait, is there?
We can go on to his next
There's a motion on the
In a
floor.
second.
There is a motion and
Okay.
a second, and I mean, unless y'all want to withdraw, and then we come back to it.
But there is a question that hadn't been answered.
Right, and she's going to take her a little bit to
It's
get
gonna
that
take me a
number.
little
so.
bit. I need the salary pay.
Can we postpone?
Might be a
and
good
come
time
back to
for a
it?
5-minute break.
Give me a 5-minute break.
The next question may be for Lisa too.
Okay.
Let's take a 10-minute break.
Do we have another, is there
10
another
minutes
question?
in.
Is there another question for me? Are we gonna take a 10-minute break?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, our 10 minutes is up, whether it is or not. We're going to go ahead and start back. And Lisa, I guess you got some numbers for us.
46,632.
All right.
And it said you have it.
That's in the general fund. That's the effect in the general fund.
That's one deputy.
It would affect, here it is. The mayor, administrator of elections, register of deeds, assessor, trustee, county clerk, court clerk, clerk and master, sheriff.
8 people,
Always.
9 people.
I didn't count. It sounds about right.
Would that also affect the deputy to the mayor? Is that still
No,
2/3 of the mayor?
Yes, yeah, in that one, because it does calculate off the head.
I
That's
didn't know if we still did it that way or not.
Yeah.
Okay, so we do have a motion, Andy second, and we do have a figure of 46,000. Is that correct?
46,632.
Okay, 46,632. Is there any further discussion on this issue?
I know that number sounds minuscule compared to the overall size of our budget, but, you know, that's the equivalent of one deputy. You know, that's more than a school teacher. That's, you know, that's not an insignificant amount of money, so.
Any other comments or discussion? Hearing none, let's call roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
No.
Commissioner Piercy?
No.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Peak?
Yes.
5-2.
Mr. Stevens, have you got any more?
I do have some more things to consider. So the Register of Deeds has a fund called the EDP Fund, Electronic Data Processing Fund. Every time you go and record a document, you pay $2, and that goes into this fund. And it can only be used for functions of her office. And I believe it's like $500,000 or $600,000 in that fund now. And it brings in, you know, a substantial amount of money each year. And I was looking at some of the things that her office does, and also looking at our archive, and was wondering if we moved the archive from the regular fund into the registrar's office and paid it out of that electronic data processing fund, that would free up the money in our regular fund.
The thing, it can be used for function, but it's used for stuff related to electronic processing. So it's DP services, DP equipment. I don't believe that you could use that for the salary of archivist.
Well, the register said in Shelby County they're doing that, and she didn't have.
Are they using their archive fees for that?
She said they're using their EDP fund. And so, you know, she didn't have an opinion one way or the other whether to do this or not, but she said it would work if we wanted to do it. And then I asked our archivist about it, and he was not as excited about it, but
I guess I look at all the other ones that are DP related revenues, that we match it to DP services, equipment, supply, DP supplies. That's what we've used. We've never
Does
used.
she not pay anybody's salary out of there now?
No, we've never used the
I thought she was
DP
paying the
funds.
employees that were doing the scanning and so forth out of that electronic data processing fund.
Not their salaries. We'll use the equipment and the supplies, but we've never used salaries out of DP revenue for any, because there's several DP, the sheriff has DP, look at all these revenues, there's a lot of DP, but we've only matched it to data processing expenses. Now, the question would be archiving. There's revenues that come in for archiving.
Correct, in the different offices
And hers, but all, like the courts. That's probably the largest amount of money coming in is out of the circuit, out of the courts for archiving. County clerk gets a little bit, chancellor gets a little bit. The lion's share is coming out of the courts. And if you designate that, we designate that for the archiving, then that's how I would allocate those funds to that. But that's not new.
but they use those in their offices for archiving.
Well, it's for expenses specific for archiving, but archiving not, are they not doing a lot for, is our archiving department doing a lot of archiving for the courts? If the answer is yes, then I'd say, why can't we use some of that archiving to fund our archiving?
Well, those are different funds, so you're telling the EDP cannot be used.
I don't believe EDP, we've never used EDP for a salary.
By statute or by internal?
Well, it's for electronic data processing, but that's the whole thing, is to help offset these offices for their computers and all that technology.
Would it be okay with the committee to allow Mr. Logan to speak?
Sure.
Is that all right? All right, Mr. Logan.
I hate to interrupt. Mr. Stevens called me at 3:50 this afternoon to discuss this, and I haven't had much time to think about it, but if we took all the archives operating expenses out, be either one of those funds, you're going to deplete the funds. There's not enough coming every year to pay the total operating fees for the archives. There's a couple other, it's not as simple, yes or no, we can do it. It's going to have to be something that would be way further discussed, because it involves a lot of departments and elected officials, not just myself or the mayor even. So I love the fact that you're looking to trying to find money somewhere and use funds for things. The other thing with the archiving fees, those offices that pull in those money are using those money outside of what we do at the archives. So it does impact them. It's not, there's money sitting on paper, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go right equate to archive budget. Annual,
Right, because they use it for their own storage.
It'd be a great discussion further, but I don't think we're going to come with a decision tonight.
I see Ms. Dahlbarn's here. Would you like to add to the conversation?
Sure. Happy to. The EDP fund, we currently are trying to share that as much as we possibly can with other county offices by doing scanning and microfilming for them. And I have 2 people assigned to records management. I do not pull their salaries from that EDP, but I am allowed to. I can attest to that. It can be done. We haven't done that. We haven't had a need to. I don't know what other questions you have for me other than there is an account balance there, and it is restricted for the use of the registrar's office.
By scanning for other officers.
We actually had a Senator Ketron at the time, Mayor Ketron, and Joe Carr carried that for me. That Rutherford County had made it a duty of the register of deeds office to do records management, which allows me to do that for the other offices.
how do you do it for them? You must pay your person for it, then you're
Right,
paying.
I'm paying for that person. Those people are in my office doing those services for other county departments and elected officials currently. So technically, yes, I'm using my records manager and his assistant to do records for other county offices.
So you could use
I could technically, for those two salaries, I could use the money for that, if I so chose to. We just decided to keep it simple and status quo with salaries and keep it all the same. Because that would also entail the benefits and all of that also coming through, you know, the periphery parts coming out of there for accounting purposes, so it would be do it that way. But yes, it has been done in one particular county I know of does, which is Shelby.
I definitely think it's something we should explore in the future, because if we can move this into that fund, then we can free up that money to use for other purposes.
That's what she's doing for us now.
I'm trying to use that money. I haven't, you know, and I realized when I first took office that there was a large pot of money. We upgraded all of our systems. We put in a microfilm lab and started doing things in-house to save money. We've scanned and done all we need to do in the registrar's office, but I'm making it as fast as I'm using it, I guess is the thing to say. So it's replenishing, you know, a little over 100,000 a year. So it's kind of one of those things, and I already have the equipment, so it's not like there's more expenses. There'll be updates and replacing the equipment over time, but not to the tune of what was collected. So trying to find ways to use that and utilize it for the county.
I mean, is that something you think that we would be able to budget on a yearly basis though? Or is that something like Commissioner Stevens just said that we'd have to look into?
Well, we'll have to look into it, depending on what all the budget, you know, I don't know all the numbers. I haven't seen all the numbers for the other department, so I wouldn't know. We'd have to look at that and see. But it's quite possible. I mean, it's possible, and there's, you know, then again, parts of, I guess maybe parts of it, I'm not sure. If I kept the salaries in my general thing and did everything else, maybe that it would work. For sure, to continue on.
Sounds like we need our attorney to help us with this too, so. Thank you, Ms. Stockman.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
That's all that I have for now.
Mr. Gooch.
Mr. Chairman, are we on the, where are we on the agenda item? Are we down to item 9, tax levy?
We are.
Okay, I would like to make a motion, please.
Go ahead.
I move that we set the tax levy, the general fund, 48.53 cents. This would leave us still almost at 20% ending fund balance, and our requirement is 15. I move that the ambulance fund budget be at 7.18 cents. Road and bridge fund be set at 0.99 cents. General purpose school fund be set at $1.54. This would leave an ending fund balance equivalent to 5.69%. I think we have a minimum of 3%.
Sorry, Commissioner Gooch, what was that number?
1.0054.
Education capital projects at 7.5 cents. Debt service at 45.2 cents, which would leave an ending fund balance equivalent to almost 82%. And I'll move for approval.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second? Mr. Piercy has a second. Is there any discussion?
This, Mr. Chairman, would be a 0-cent tax increase. It would also leave our combined ending fund balance at $122 million, which is almost a combined ending fund balance of 20% of our budget.
What's the proposed tax rate figured up there, Lisa?
To be the same.
20994.
Have a motion and a second. Do I hear any further discussion?
So our school fund, what was the percentage on the unending fund balance for this year?
Are you saying what are we getting or ending, what are proposed?
What will be ending with?
With taking that out, it would end like a 23, like nearly 23.7.
So I mean, what's the percentage like at the end of this year? At the end of like June 30th, what's the percentage going to be, or roughly? I know you don't have an exact amount yet.
Like where we are now, what is
Right.
to our revenue?
What percentage of dollars?
Percentage.
Hold on. That's gonna be rough. All right, so we're getting 449. This is without anything that was done today. Like 11 and a half.
So it drops about half then.
Yeah.
And it's 3%
Minimum.
And this would be 11?
No, he's saying, how are we ending this year? How are we going to end this year?
With this proposal, we'll end with 5.69 next year. So I was trying to see what's the difference.
Yeah.
What do we historically end with them?
Like historically, like it's been all over the board. I mean, sometimes, here's the thing, what we've done, I can't answer that right off my top of my head. But one thing with the schools, and you probably have seen it since you've been here, when they do come in with good fund balances, they have used it to fund things in capital projects. Offsets that we did not have to borrow.
But we're addressing some of the capital projects with the
Yes,
increase.
yes, but I'm saying, you asked me what is in total. I mean, I don't have that for you. How do we typically, I don't have that.
I mean, has it ever been close to 3%? Have we ever gotten down to the wire with it, or is there always a few percent to it?
The year that, yes, Jet back there, yes, I was really, yeah. The worst time, and I can't even remember what the year was, but when we did reduce our balances down low, the effect of that occurred in December, where we were sweating having enough cash to make payroll. Now, that was in both money.
And with our current funding levels versus our expenditures, we've got to be prepared to cover that, as much of that difference as possible.
Now, this tax levy will support the budgets that we have in prior meetings approved. So, for example, the expenditures for the educational capital maintenance program, that will be fully funded on what the school board has sent over and what we have prior meetings approved. The school board, the general purpose school fund, will be funded per the request that came from the Health and Ed and what we approved in prior meetings, and so with the general fund. So it's not like this tax levy will force the school board or anyone to cut what we've already approved.
Are we removing almost a nickel out of debt service to cover that? That's where it's coming from? So we're acquiring new debt and we're gonna be retiring it not as fast?
Well, actually, I mean, you know, all those scenarios that I was doing for you was, you know, showing you 20-year debt, you know. But this project, it's a piece of 17 million, it's going to be over 10 years, not 20. So it's no different than if you think about it as a mortgage. What happens when you take your 30-year mortgage and say, we'll do it at 15, your principal and interest goes up. So we're going to have a compressed 10 years on 17 million. But the rest of it coming in should be 20.
So have you looked at the ripple effect of how this will look next year and the year after? Only because we're only going to have this reserve 1 year to do this. And so we're going to have to fund it next year. So I'm just curious, have y'all talked about that?
We haven't,
Okay.
you know, doing it that, you know, taking it out. No, we haven't done that. One strategy that we could do, I mean, you know, I'm pushing off, you know, the money that we've got for schools and maybe something that, you know, all the projects that's coming in on the county side. Again, if we just push it out a year, do a little interim financing, and then borrow it out into the next year, that will save you a year's principal and interest.
Commissioner
on that
Johnson.
other bit.
So basically what Commissioner Gooch proposed, that will address the $764,000 something budget, is that right?
Yes, and it meets your policies.
Of the ending fund balance, at what, 15%?
15, your
We'll see.
policy is 15% minimum
Okay.
in your general fund. Schools are at 3, and the debt service between 65, about 65, 75.
So we'll still be in the 15 to
Yes.
16%?
Yes.
And I think a point too, and I've said it before, this would still leave combined ending fund balance, if you think about it in terms of $122 million. I think some people call it a rainy day fund, but it's not that it's money in the bank, but again, it is money in the bank. It is in the bank, so if we have some mishaps along the way, we'll have something to fall back on. But, you know, I promised my constituents that before I raise taxes, I would look at every option, exhaust every option, and there is an option, and it would still keep our ending fund balance healthy. And so that's why I'm a little tired to try not to have a tax increase, because we do have that option.
Lisa,
Sir?
if we reduce our debt service by 5 cents, how much in 20 years is that going to increase our money that we've got to spend? Because that's part of what we're talking about
If
here.
we decrease, let's use round numbers like $5 million, right?
Let's use real numbers. If we got to take another 10 minutes, or whatever we're going to take,
Okay,
let's
so-
use real numbers.
Okay, so let's do it this way. Again, it's round numbers, because it's like, how much are we taking out? Was it 4.8? 4 point,
What's the nickel on it, or what's the dime today?
4.8
It's around
cents?
33.
4.902.
Yes, he said debt service would go to 45.2. So he's taking out.
4.502.
So he's taking out 4.8.
4.8, okay, so 4.8 pennies, and a penny is worth $796,931. $3,825,000 that we're dropping.
That's school, that's 791
That's a
is
school penny.
Schools.
That's a school penny. It's 900 and something.
937,014.
More than 933.
937,014.
937,014. Okay, so that's $4.5 million that we're reducing out. Easy figuring. I'm gonna say $70,000 is what we can fund $1 million worth of borrowed money. So debt service of $1 million, 75. 70,000. So you are taking away debt service to fund $64 million worth of projects, to look at it that way. You understand what I said? What I did? I just took.
Principal and interest on that?
Yeah, that's
For 1 year?
For 1 year. For 1 year. It's like, but what are we giving up? What are we giving up? How much ability to cover projects?
$64 million.
$64 million worth of projects.
Is that over what kind of a period of time?
Well, I mean, that's 1 year. I mean, so you're,
5 pennies,
it's
70,000 per.
It's five,
$1 million.
that's why I look at it, 5 pieces you're taking out now for the next 20 years. I mean, because that amount, it would service $64 million worth of debt if you kept it in there.
My point of bringing that up, it's just like me using my charge card. If I don't pay it for a year, I'm gonna pay the interest. And that's basically what we're doing here. Y'all have all had a chance to look at the capital projects that we're looking at. One is the 17 million. We're fixing to look at appropriations in a few minutes on the Motorola project. We're also, if I'm not mistaken, we're looking at a elementary school, in the spring, which is 35 million, give or take, whatever these bids come in nowadays.
Well, by then, I would think, so I'm kind of delaying, is, you've got 22 million on that Rocky Fork Elementary? Rock Springs Elementary. That addition, I think it was 22 million, and another for the schools, 9 million or so for Christiana. But I
I
figured.
think altogether it was about maybe 17 or 18 million, was it?
But I figure y'all are gonna be coming forward soon.
Yes.
With the cost of the building, the cost of the school on the Christiana side.
That's right.
That's coming. So that's gonna add to what we will borrow. That I'm thinking in the spring next year, that will affect the, let's see, spring of 20, that will affect the next fiscal year. Is that right?
Okay, so
1920.
So knowing what you know, additional projects, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that we're going to be taking on the $500,000 annually in the Motorola agreement, what will our tax levy need to be?
Thank you, Mark.
Next year?
I don't have that, but not putting anything in, we're gonna have the same discussion next year.
That's what I'm saying, assuming everything is flat. Assuming revenue's flat, we don't increase any expense.
If everything's
what
same-
you know, what are we gonna have to, what's the levy need to be next year? Because we're not gonna have this to do again next year.
You're not gonna have, if we only get the money that we're budgeting, if we spend every dime,
Right.
that's what you're gonna
That's
use
the
up your
worst
fund
case
balance.
basis,
Yes,
right.
then, and you say, we're gonna do it again for the second year. Let's see that, general fund, did you do that? Did you do that general fund? So we're projecting 12, taking that 7 cents out, taking 12 million out of fund balance. And we're projecting with this at 22, I mean, you will definitely be down below your 3%. I mean, your 15%. Next year, that's what I'm saying.
If you spend
The
all the
next
money.
year. If you spend it all and only get the money that we buy.
But sales tax might increase. I mean, we don't know.
Yes, we don't know. We don't know. I just don't want to, I just will say that we will talk about this again next year.
So basically, we're putting off the inevitable.
Well, we don't know.
Well, that's true.
We don't know. We don't know.
We do know we have a tremendous amount of construction coming up. That's one, we have borrowing on the horizon.
When you look at what's coming up on the schools, two elementaries, well, elementary, the addition, middle schools, I think they have 3 middle schools on there, or 2 middle schools and an addition.
There's a scenario where it's 90 million a year for 5 years.
Yeah, well,
We look
here,
at a
in
five-
total, $416
Granted,
million.
we tend to push that to 10 years. We seem to be pretty successful. But that debt load is indeed on the horizon. That's what I struggle with.
Okay.
Your comfort level is the ability to pay it.
So in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, if we need an increase in debt service, then we'll look at it. I mean, it's not that.
When the debt is established and the income in the preceding years established, you're saying we'll have
Right.
real numbers then?
Because you're talking about a potential very good increase in the sales tax. And, you know, we're going to have reappraisal again in 4 years. What I'm saying is, you know, would we need to increase taxes, say if we don't do it now, in 3 years, for example? And the answer is we don't know. So it's very hard for some of us to vote for a tax increase because we might need one in 3 years. So let's look at that in 3 years.
Well, you're looking at the school's projected budget right there, and you hand it over to them, it's almost $500 million above what our debt is right now, if those schools are built.
And with
You're
schools,
saying, but without, that shows a real debt on the horizon, but it doesn't show our income between now and then. You want to see that income.
Yeah,
So-
I think
It's
so.
part of your-
Yeah.
so with schools, I guess that's the largest number, taking that money out of schools, they're projecting using $21 million of fund balance.
For this coming year.
Yes.
Right.
Taking away those additional pennies.
We're not
That
taking away
appropriation-
anything.
Well, I mean, not adding
Be
to,
neutral.
not remaining neutral. Okay, so then we're 21 million out of fund balance at what we're using. And to your point, if everything stayed the same, and we're talking about this again next year, their estimated ending is 23.7. So it's almost like what we're seeing with the ambulance fund, though it hit us this year. If all things stayed the same, next year, you'd have a beginning fund balance of $2 million and making up 21, not 10. I mean, that's what I'm saying. We're going to talk about it again next year.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it.
And I think, Trace, you're very logical. My concern, so the city's has done this. The city kind of got burned. And the city's done this over a long period of time. And you're just saying, let's look at it every year, every 2 years. They've not done it for 20 and had to have this massive increase.
Yeah,
Do you think we can avoid that? Stay at zero, and if we look at it more often, we can avoid the big increase?
I think so. I think that, one, there's a lot of unknowns. You know, I think that in the next 2 or 3 years, we're more likely to see growth in revenue than some kind of a decline in revenue as far as our economy and our financial situation. But, and we may need an increase at some point in time in debt service. And I get that, but let's do it that year, whatever year that might be. And let's move forward this year with the motion on the table. You've got to look at it too. Murfreesboro just increased at what, 35%?
34%.
34.8, 35.8.
Oh, percent. Okay, so a third. And then here we come along. What can we do to not have to raise taxes? Hopefully this Murfreesboro situation will carry them forward, where they're not looking at another tax increase in the near future. And this, we may not need a tax increase in the near future, but if we have to put it off for 3 years, let's put it off. Because we just don't know. Things may be a lot better, Commissioner, more likely to be a lot better than a lot worse.
Well, you do know you're adding $64 million worth of debt, if I'm not mistaken. Is that the number you had, Lisa?
Well, I had 20, I was figuring 35 million, not counting the additional school. I was at
No, your previous number, your 70,000 per million
Oh.
in payment was a $64 million debt.
That-
You have to forego.
that's what
Projects you're foregoing.
Right.
Is that what you're referring to? That
It
number?
is.
Yeah.
He's taking that.
Well, and if debt service obviously stays the same, and it could be changed throughout the years, whether moving around or adding to it.
Mayor Kitchen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Nolan, when I took office in September, the previous commission from last year, did they approve a budget this time last year in July 1? Was it not upside down?
It was, I mean, that's, yeah.
So last year's commission approved a negative budget. It was
Okay.
not balanced.
Went to fund balance
Okay,
like we're suggesting
so-
now.
Correct.
So-
Correct. And if we were to balance the budget today, starting July 1, how many pennies would we need? 46?
Oh, that was for all funds, was around 46 to balance.
If we balanced,
If we balanced everybody.
we need
that-
46 cents.
Yes.
Okay? So your motion is 20 cents
20 cents.
would get us. Yes, Commissioner, we don't know what tomorrow brings. Looking at the national news, no, we don't, but it's not looking too good in the Middle East right now, which could dramatically affect all sales tax. I'm just more conservative about coming back this time next year and being more upside down than what we are this year.
And I think that's the decision that we're kind of battling with.
Exactly.
Is, do we go with this or?
Yeah. So
or do
I
we do-
just wanted both sides
Yeah.
to be presented. I don't vote, okay? I just wanted everybody to make the best decision for the county.
So this is the trend that's concerning to me, is that when we adopted this year's budget, in the general fund, we were upside down 7.4. With your proposal, we're upside down 12. In schools, we started upside down almost 15. With this proposal, we're upside down 21.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
We're using more. Because the revenues do not grow. I mean, they grow some, but they don't grow like what the other expenses grow at the same pace.
You figure your revenue, you seem to provide us with information, you're very conservative with your revenue. And in the last couple of years, your revenue has exceeded your expectations.
Yes.
I know it didn't back in 5, 6, 7, 8.
It was.
It was
yeah,
closer.
Especially when the interest was going down. You know, we had a lot of things happening and going down, but what saved us a lot was not spending everything.
Do you know how much your revenue exceeded last year's expectations? You referenced the upside down.
Yeah,
This
upside down,
year-
and how do we, you know,
This year,
this
you-
is where we want to, it's like, well, how did we end up? Did we,
I mean, it's improved over the
between the
last
two?
3 meetings.
Well, I mean, it was improving all year
A
long.
few million dollars.
I mean, it was,
Well, on this would suggest it would be almost $21 million. Am I correct?
is that the revenue changes in total? Yeah, we improved in total, all of them 20. Are you gonna get that every year? I mean,
I'm just saying,
and
that's one part
really,
of
when
unknown.
you talk about the estimates, how do I estimate it? Well, property tax is the biggest one, and we're using the assessed values as it is on June 14th. That's where we are. That's what this is based on. The rest of them are trends. You saw them coming up some as we were going through. I think Commissioner Allen noticed fees and fines were going down. They were going down this year. I reflect that same trend next year. Sales tax, I mean, we don't budget huge numbers up because, you know, there was one year we were budgeting 5 to 10% increase. It was awful when it was coming down. It wasn't there.
Okay, we've had quite a bit of discussion. We're going to continue discussing. Are there any other comments?
The only thing I'd like to say is,
I'm kind of in agreement with Mr. Gooch. And I believe if we put it off raising the tax rate, it will give us another year to really look seriously about how to get more tax money off of the growth of this county, off development and growth. You know, that's just my thought there.
I understand where you're coming from as far as growth, though, but, we're locked on as far as our development tax, where we're able to charge for new construction. We're locked in at $1,500. And that's not going to change any sooner than the next legislative meeting, which will be after the first of the year. But even then, I don't see too much of a glimmer of hope that would change.
Do we know when we might see any numbers on the new bill, the online sales tax bill that passed? Do we have any idea when that,
Probably 2020.
that's what I'm wondering. I figured there'd be significant lag time, I just don't know what the lag time would be.
Any other discussion?
Say late 2020, after next year.
Like 2021 fiscal year?
So, Lisa's, if I broke down Trey's numbers correctly, as he was going through them, he basically left the 2018 certified tax rate for county general alone, right?
It's pretty much leaving everything alone except for adding the 2 cents to the ambulance, adding the 2.8 to the education capital projects, and taking the balance out of debt service.
So how are we covering the raises?
Fund balance.
They're all from fund balance. So if we put the 5 cents back, if we did a 5-cent tax increase, so we put 5 cents back on debt service, because I guess my concern is, we know we're acquiring that debt. We know we're acquiring it. I mean, 1,000 kids a year, this fall it's going to be 1,200. I don't see that number going down anytime soon. So I really want to keep retiring that debt as quickly as possible. We'll get the new communication system coming up. We're going to have some landfill solution on the horizon. I don't see the need for pennies in debt service going down. So I'm just trying to think out loud of how do we give the raises that we know we need to give, and we also have agreed we're going to be proactive in staying on top of that. I just don't see this. I don't see this budget shrinking, and so
I don't either.
I'm not excited about a tax increase. I don't want to do a tax increase, but I'm really nervous about taking money out of debt service to fund it. I'm nervous enough about taking out of fund balance, although I completely understand what you're saying.
That 82% figure that he gave at the end of next year, what all projects will be funded from the borrowing we do based on that ending fund balance? Does that include the schools and the communication system?
Well, when you look at debt service, I've dropped that in there. I've got the communication. I've got the, if you want to flip.
But what about the school?
Okay, it's not in there.
So it's not going to be 82%, it's going to be lower than that if you
It all
add
depends on when we borrow it. When I say that, if we borrow in the spring, I will not have a principal and interest payment until next year.
But that's where we'd have to do the capital outlay note, possibly.
No, I mean, well, yes.
To get it going.
If we don't, depending on how fast the school board spends money on those 2 projects, depending on how soon the mayor's projects are coming on board. It may be that I'll have to do some interim borrowing. We can just do it in the spring and take care of it. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
But if it gets a little tight, then I may do a quick one just to get us through. We just watch the cash balances in 189. But that's what I'm saying. It won't. We would do it in the spring of 2020, and we would not have a debt service payment until the 2021 fiscal year.
So I guess my question is, if we're willing to go this route, which is brave, it's a brave way to go. What kind of commitment are you willing to give to a tax increase next year if we have to do this next year?
Well, I mean, if this passes and a year or 2 or 3 years, we have to punt and relook at it. Again, my commitment is to exhaust all efforts, to exhaust all options before I vote for a tax increase. But I'm very mindful of our capital commitment to our constituents.
It's just, this feels like the quintessential kicking the can down the road. If there's ever been a year where it feels like we're kicking the can, this feels like the year we're kicking it. It really
I
does.
know.
Yeah.
I think unfortunately, we are setting our tax rate after Murfreesboro City has. I think a lot of the discussion that we saw at the public hearing was related to that more so than ours, at least from the number of calls I'm getting from constituents, which has been 1 in favor and 1 against. Is there any, excuse me, go ahead.
And I do just want to make one point on that. You know, I love that folks are engaged, but they're also very often misinformed. I would really encourage anybody who wants to know and understand what this body is doing and has been doing, go online and read the minutes, read the meeting minutes if you need to understand how we're spending money and what we're spending it on. There are hours of budget meetings online that you can go on and you can watch. So, you know, for somebody to say, you're doing this without telling me what you're doing, or you're doing this without explaining what I'm getting, if you haven't been keeping up, that, you know, that's not on us, because we've been investing hours in this. And so I would just encourage people to go online and be informed, get their own information. Don't get it from social media, don't get it from your buddy. You know, invest it. If you're that concerned about it and you want to be that engaged, go get your own information, because it is there.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a question. Let's play the what-if game. What if we came to some compromise, and I hate the word compromise, but a property tax increase to address the 64 million plus that we're looking at for debt service? And what would you think that would be necessary if we entertained even a small property tax increase? And I hate property tax increases like anybody else, but there's no free lunch. It's got to be paid for. So, Mr. Chairman here said something about the $64 million projects.
Well, I said 64 million, that if you take that out of debt service forever,
Yeah.
for the next 20 years, I mean, I guess that's one way I'm just looking at it, $64 million to be able to pay the debt service. And you've got 416 million coming on, potentially. I'm not answering your question. I'm just saying, you are taking it out and you see it coming in on the horizon. I think what Commissioner Gooch is saying, I see it on the horizon, I'll address it when it gets here. Sorry.
Kind
Well, I'm kind of like Commissioner Allen. We need to address the debt fund, period. We'll never be out, there's no way that we'll ever be debt-free because of the growth and everything else. The school system, will have to get repaired and all this and everything else. We'll never be debt-free, but we need to get it as manageable as possible. So
It really depends on how quickly the projects come. You know, as the school boards have told you, you know, they're good at 1 and 2 years out. The rest, I mean, you know, you've got so many variables that can happen.
Except the trend of 1,100 kids a year has been consistent.
It's been
for
consistent.
20 years since Mr. Odom started showing
Oh
us.
gosh, yeah, before then.
That's my concern.
And the cost, the escalating cost of the buildings.
Well, the more concern in the debt fund is how to pay for all the teachers and people, the operational costs.
The operational side.
The debt service fund is fine. You've got millions of dollars in there, and you're retiring, what, $30 or $40 million of debt every year. So that's not the problem. The problem is going to be
Operational.
the operational cost. So if you put the money back in, if you're going to increase the taxes and you put it in the debt service fund, you're putting it in the wrong place. It needs to go into the operational funds for the schools and the county general. The debt service fund is fine. The balances are actually higher than I thought they were going to be.
But we do get some operating funds, and we get a chunk of our operating funds from once those students show up.
Right, but where you're going to have your deficits is going to be in the payroll and the benefits for all the new people.
No, that's what I'm saying. We get a lot of that. You get a per pupil amount of money that comes in with those kids. So when those kids show up, a lot of that revenue shows up too. The first year that you're short, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the first year that you're short is on all the admin. That's not covered on that first year.
And your growth students are
Your
not
growth
fully
students, right.
funded. It lags a year.
Right.
But those funds are going to be where you're short, not the debt service fund. I don't know, I'm torn on what to do. I do know if you give government more money, it's going to be spent. We're still going to be looking for more money the next year anyway. You know, if you give it, it's going to be spent. And one of the best ways to control the growth of government is to limit revenues as much as you can too, because it does make you work harder to work with what you have.
So you're encouraging us to be brave.
Well, I'm not encouraging you. You have to make your own decision on what to do there. But I will say the balances are higher than I expected they would be, so that was encouraging.
Well, they're there for a reason, because we fought hard to keep debt service at the levels it was so that we can pay this debt off. And we've been paying the debt off. You notice it's been going down, and that's my aim, to get this debt paid off, because all we're doing is shoveling more on top of it. And if you don't pay as you go, sooner or later it's going to catch up with you.
Common sense, if you're paying 35 million on your debt service and you're going in debt 64 million, do the math.
Well, we have a motion and a second. We've had a lot of discussion. Is there any more discussion? And I'm not trying to cut anybody short. Please speak up if you want to. Not hearing any, let's call roll.
Mr. Johnson?
No.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
No.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Pick?
No. Motion carries 4-3. Okay. Lisa, you'll have to give us a breakdown on that. And you got
Because
that.
I'm gonna have to, because we hit a lot of lines throughout the budget. I mean, the appropriation budget,
Pension.
resolution, you're just gonna have to, we'll have to rework all of that, because all the, that retirement thing is gonna affect all the schools, it's gonna affect all the operating budgets, we'll have to rework those. That change and the change for the elected officials, that will be changed. And these are, that's, am I right? That's what I understand we've got to fix. And I will rework this sheet for Wednesday morning, so then we can get how it will look, how the fund balances will look.
So we actually will not be able to approve, well, we have approved it.
Well, you can approve it with those changes.
Okay. But we can't do that tonight till
Yeah,
we
you
see
can.
those. Oh, it's contingent upon those changes being.
Right, right. I mean, because you've done you voted on the tax levy, now the appropriation is what Mark has with those changes that,
Just everything we've approved all along,
right,
plus the changes we made tonight.
that we've made tonight. And that will be reflected in all those budgets.
Well, we need a motion to approve the appropriation resolution contingent upon the
With the-
figures with the changes that have been made tonight.
And that's the changes of reducing the retirement rate from 1066 to 1016, changing the elected officials 9/12 at the current tier, 3 months at the next tier.
The Homeland Security and the insurance.
The
that we
Homeland Security and those things that
approved at the
those
beginning.
other ones that we've changed. That's what we changed.
Okay, you've heard Ms. Lisa, do I hear a motion? I can't make the motion. It's gonna have to come from one of you guys, so.
You're the leader. You took us down this
No, I
road.
mean-
You better keep
So
marching, fella.
So just a motion to approve appropriate.
He's got the appropriation resolution on here. Yes, that's what I'm saying. It's on there. It's 1920 appropriations resolution that he has with the numbers before we walked in here tonight. That's what I'm saying. Everyone that's got a salary line item is going to change because of that change in retirement rate. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's
But
what
their
it's
salary's
changing.
not changing. Based upon
And the
this.
salary of the elected officials will change.
Okay, gotcha.
The raises are going.
The raises are gone. That's what I'm saying, is to approve this with those changes that we've done.
Well, I'll move to approve this motion with the changes.
Second.
A motion and a second. Do I hear any more discussion?
I still think we need to find a way to cap some of the salary increases at the top, but I'm not going to make any more motions, so.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Do I hear any other discussion? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
No.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen? Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Peak?
No. Okay, motion carries. Our next item is to the initial resolution to issue general obligation bonds, and this will be for the Motorola project.
We're asking you to approve two things. It's the initial and the final. The initial resolution under Title IX is what we borrow under, gives the population 20 days to protest. So we're doing that one and then approving the final. So if there's protest, we won't move forward.
How much protest?
It's up to 10% of the voters. And that's not unusual when we borrow for general projects. We do, that is the normal course of business.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve initial resolution to issue general obligation bonds as presented.
Mr. Dodd, there's a motion. Do I hear a second? Mr. Johnson, second. Do I hear any further discussion on this motion? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Peak?
Yes. Motion carries. Now the next is the actual.
Bond resolution.
Reflecting the previous, correct? I'll make a motion to approve the bond resolution.
Have a motion. Do I hear a second for this bond issuance?
Second.
Commissioner Johnson, second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
No.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Peak?
Yes. Motion carries. Now, under other business, we do, which is good news, have some other business, so we're not quite through for tonight. And, Lisa, I guess you'll cover this with the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, you should have on your tablet, I got this was given to me today. This actually was a grant that was proposed to the Christy Houston Foundation. And so being unaware, it was unable to go through Public Safety Committee. I've already talked to Chairman Reed about this, but we would like to run it through there because it's accepting money for this grant. It was actually proposed, I believe, Kevin, you still in there? Okay. It was proposed for the city of Murfreesboro and us, Laverne, several of the communities, city of Murfreesboro, our fire and rescue, and our ambulance. So Christy Houston gave all of those responding. It says, I'm pleased to inform you that directors at their monthly meeting, Christy Houston, held Wednesday, June 19th, approved the grant request for Rutherford County Fire Department in the amount of $16,225, Rutherford County EMS in the amount of $11,000 to purchase the protective equipment for active shooter and assailant event. So this is armor that they would actually, when fighting the fires, they would wear the bulletproof because they are sometimes targeted as they're fighting fires. So that's what these grants are for. And don't want to wait till August in order to sign these grants. So I wanted to run it through for accepting of these two grants for our two first responding units, and then on to, I guess you or Chairman Pettis can put that in front of the full commission on Wednesday morning.
Is there any matching funds on this, Mayor?
No, sir.
I'm in this.
It's just a grant.
All right. Do I hear a motion to accept this grant?
So
It's free money.
Hear a motion?
Second.
And a second.
And my
Please.
question is to add this to the revenue and appropriation for the 19-20 fiscal year. So we'll add this in. It's coming in July, so we'll put this into the budget for the 19-20 fiscal year.
Just
Make
part of
sure
your
that was
motion.
part of your motion.
That'd just be bookkeeping measure anyway.
Well, I mean, you approved those other
Sure.
changes. This is just going to be another change that we'll do. I just want to make sure that
That's fine.
that's part of your motion.
That's fine.
So all right with you, and also with the second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept these grants, and we need to call roll on this. So we're involving money.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Peters?
Yes.
See, we're already gaining revenue we didn't know was coming.
And an expense.
That's what I say.
And an expense.
At least we don't have to do it all.
All right. So our next meeting is this Wednesday at 9 a.m. And,
Good lunch.
well, that may be true. May need to back lunch.
Do we have to break this from the time?
Yeah, they're doing
I hadn't heard.
it. I got an
Sounds
email
like
to that Farm Bureau lady doing the
Mr.
breakfast
Chairman,
snack.
I had a
That's
question,
correct. Farm Bureau.
a question about why we're having the meeting Wednesday at 9. And I wanted to just let everybody know that we do this every year. This isn't something where we've changed it from a night meeting to a morning meeting. This was something we do every year.
Always
At 9 o'clock.
a 9 o'clock meeting.
So I just wanted to clarify for the people out there that thought we might be meeting at a different time.
Commissioner Gurley, you want to say something?
Yes, if you allow me.
Please.
I'd just like to invite everyone this Friday to the Blackman Community Club barbecue. It's being held at the Grove. Blackman Community Club, next to Commissioner Reed's Brewerton Club out in Rockville, is the second oldest community group in Rutherford County. And we'll be having a barbecue, invite everyone out to enjoy food and fellowship.
Thank you.
That's this Friday, 70th year.
Hearing no other business, we're adjourned.